It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to St Andrews on this our organ rededication weekend, and it's great to see so many of you on this happy occasion for our church and for our village. It's 3 years exactly since I came to Corbridge as vicar, and I well remember, when you arrive, there's an inbox of stuff that is kind of waiting for the new pharaoh. And one of the very big things in my inbox was, what are we going to do about the organ? And of course I was aware that there was the sadness that the previous Heritage Lottery Fund application had not been successful, so in some senses we were back to square one. But I have to say the bid had been wonderfully prepared, and we knew exactly what we wanted to do. We knew that the organ, after over 40 years bearing the heat of the day, rather like all of us, various parts were wearing out and need to be renewed. And of course technology is ever changing, and with the benefits now of new technologies, but also there were some very exciting plans to enhance the instrument, to make it even better. So really everything was set up. The only problem was we didn't have the money, and that was going to be £100,000. However, in my early weeks in Corbridge, and simply because of the way in which I felt so wonderfully welcomed to this community, I had a great sense of just what a brilliant community this is, and that there are so many people of goodwill who value our village, its history, and who are rather proud of this historical and beautiful church. So I had a hunch. Let's invite both the church membership and the wider community to join together, since I do believe in partnerships, in seeking to guarantee this part of Corbridge's heritage, which after all is a gift to us from our forebears. And so we had the PCC backing for the gift weekend in October 2019, when you got a little loving letter from the vicar. And over the weeks that followed, the response really was tremendous. In that £60,000 was given in the course of a few weeks by this community. And that meant two things. It meant, first of all, that we could commission the work from John Lightbound and Sons of North Shields, and I'm going to introduce Malcolm and his father, who are, I'm delighted to say, here today, the organ builders. And also it meant, because we'd done our bit, we were in a very good position then to apply to grant-giving trusts and agencies, who are always a bit more willing to respond if they see the local community has, as it were, put their own hand to the plough. So, in March 2020, the work began, just as something else was about to hit us. And of course, that was the pandemic. And while that did delay the work, nevertheless, Malcolm was able to do work in the workshop, and I was able to kind of let him in secretly. Remember the time when even the vicar wasn't allowed to go in his own church? So we had kind of clandestine liaisons, hoping that nobody would see us. And of course by Easter Sunday is when we heard the organ for the first time, although as you see from the booklet you have, and they're remarkably complex instruments, and therefore we were warned we would need a period of settling down when we've heard the odd squeak and get the tuning right, and that process has happened. But I think now we're able to say the organ is good to go. So today we simply, and this is on behalf of myself and the church wardens and the church council and everyone from St Andrew's Church, to say an enormous thank you. Thank you so much for your support, for the money that you gave to us. We couldn't have done it without you. This is part of our village heritage and our cultural heritage, and it's now safe for the next half century. And I have to say the enhancements are superb. We could have simply done the renewal and restoration work, but the organ has been wonderfully enhanced, as our organists will demonstrate in a few minutes. Not just maintenance, but enrichment. I'd also, as well as your good selves, like publicly to thank the trusts and organisations that also contributed. The Catherine Cookson Charitable Trust, the On Organ Fund, the John Pilling Trust, the Sir James Knott Trust, Northumberland County Council, Corbridge Women's Institute, and Newton Bible Women's Institute. Thank you for the tremendous support you gave us, which in the end got us over the line. And also to the members of the various organ restorations committees and all who administered the appeal and the applications to the trusts. Now, very soon I will invite our organist to give a demonstration so you can hear some of the work that has been done, illustrated by the organist who will illustrate by playing. And that will be followed then by a 45-minute recital by our three organists. And I'd just like to give them some visibility. So first of all, John Ross. Where are you, John? Can you give a bow? John is like a stick of rockness and his Corbridge going all the way through. And is our Organist Emeritus. And then Marc Bryant. And a new member of our music team, John Roper. As you may know, we operate a job share in terms of the two organists, and that's tremendous because it's a big commitment being a church organist. And it's a rather good way that enables John and Marc both to play each week here, but also to play. John plays up in the north of here, north of the Wall, Bellingham and the rest of the county, I think. And Marc has a well-developed freelance organist ministry to various churches around the diocese. Colin Williams is our director of music, and Colin's been very central to this project. Colin, would you like to stand and give a bow? And our organ builder, Malcolm Lightbound. Where are you, Malcolm? Over there. I'm over here. And one very special moment I've just had is the last restoration, which was done in the late 70s, complete in 1980, was done by his father. It was John, is that right, Malcolm? Yeah. Yes. And John Lightbound is here, so can we give you a bow as well, please? It's a wonderful piece of apostolic succession, really, having the father and son. When you're getting another drink and things, or at the end, if you want to ask any questions about the organ, then there are kind of 6 resident experts who will let you know some of the inner secrets of the church organ. I also want to express my thanks to Colin Williams, who has produced this superb little brochure. I've always collected football programmes. It's a kind of rather sad part of my life, but I always think it's nice to have a little kind of aid memoir of this project. And Colin, thank you for producing such a wonderful, informative and comprehensive guide to the church organ and its restoration. And I'm very glad to give them to you today as a little token of our thanks. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock we have our service of rededication, and I'm delighted that we have an enhanced choir joining the church choir. Last night at choir practice was simply stunning to have 34 or so singers. We're beginning the service with Hubert Parry's I Was Glad, and it's going to be tremendous. So if you are free wish to come, you'd be most welcome to join us at 10 o'clock tomorrow. I have just 3 small presentations. The first one is to John Ross. Now, I know John has had 1 or 2 retirements from Corbridge, then has kind of kept on coming back, a bit like Frank Sinatra, really. But I think John last year decided that it was the time to have, to face the final curtain. However, he's appointed him as Organist Emeritus, just because, John's really part of Lives and Handies. We couldn't think of life without him, really. So, from that point of view, he's still hardwired to us, and of course will play from time to time. But John, that's just a little thank you to express our gratitude. John was appointed organist just after he'd finished wearing nappies, and has been kind of, with us on and off throughout many years, John. So that's tremendous, and he never looks any different. And also, just a little thank you, because when the great organ was dismantled, then Marc Bryant very kindly loaned us his personal organ from home. Alas, we no sooner got to church than the church was closed by the government, and so we didn't hear as much of Marc's personal organ as we would have wished to. But nevertheless, when we did reopen, at least we still had organ music. So Marc, this is just a little thank you for And many days I kind of saw at the end of the day Malcolm, having been climbing ladders and cleaning pipes and everything, and really what he needed was someone to mop his brow, or perhaps to stick a bottle in his hand, and I never had the chance to do it. So Malcolm, I'm catching up on lost time, but I know that you've been very assiduous in caring for the organ since it was finished, in terms of, and you were here last Saturday, I know, all morning, making sure it's ready for this weekend. So this is just a little thank you for that. Right, I'm almost finished with the glad here. There's trouble with figures, they go on and on, don't they? So, what's going to happen? Well, I'd like to invite you to recharge your glasses and grab a cake, because there seems to be tons of cake left, and it's a party. We couldn't have a party without cake, so if we can do that, and then in 5 minutes' time we'll have our organ demonstration, which then will lead seamlessly into the recital.
Good afternoon, everyone. Certainly, the vicar is a difficult act to follow when it comes to speaking. I'm not anything like as good as David, but I'm here to actually give you a little bit of the history behind mostly the technology of the organ. When I first came to Corbridge, I played the organ round there, but the console was part of the organ round in the Lady Chapel there. There was a physical connection between the player and the pipes at that time. And the only function that electricity had was to drive a big electric motor which drove a fan, which created air pressure. The air pressure then did the rest. There was a physical connection between the pipes and the keyboards, and no electric other than the motor. When the next rebuild was done and the console was moved to its present position, obviously the connection between the console here and the pipes there had to be electricity. So there was at that time quite a thick cable going from here under the floor up into there, and everything was done with switchgear and so on inside there. And then with our recent rebuild, we've used obviously electricity exactly the same, but much more modern equipment working on a much lower voltage and with very, very thin wires, so that in fact the connection between The console here and there runs in a cable which is thinner than my little finger. And there's a magic box in there. I think there's a picture halfway through the brochure which has the word digital on it. I hope you don't ask me to explain the word digital, but in fact I'm just starting to understand the benefits of this digital system. If you look on the very front of your brochure, you'll see a picture of the console as it is now. And underneath each of the keyboards, you will see a row of little white buttons. We call those pistons. And there are, in the middle of each keyboard, 6 pistons, and each of those selects different stops. There are also, on the very left-hand side of the bottom keyboard, you will see one single white button. That is the one where we use to set all these different pistons. So we usually set them so that piston number 1 brings out quiet stops, piston number 6 brings out the full organ. And we can each choose a different setting so that I can turn it to my number and set those 6 pistons exactly the way I want them. John can do the same, Mark can do the same. And in fact, 30 different organists can do the same. Such is the potential of digital. Also, on either side of the top keyboard, you will see some extra buttons. These are called general pistons, and they affect not just that one keyboard, but the whole organ. So we can set up stops on the top keyboard, set up stops on the bottom keyboard, set up stops on the pedals, and with one push of a button, we can have all those stops changing at once. Also, this has what's called a sequencer, and this is approximately the toy that I enjoy most on the new organ, because with the sequencer, you are able to select stops for a certain piece and change them as you want throughout the piece. And once you've saved all those changes, you can just set off at the very beginning, and all you need to do is press a button which says plus, and the whole stops can change. So I'm going to play a piece now by George Thalben Ball called Elegy. And I've set up all these different stop changes through this sequencer, and it means that once I've started, I've dialed in my number now, I can just set off and just press the plus button and not touch any of the stops on the outside. Malcolm is the expert on this digital system, so if you have any really technical questions, then I'm sure Malcolm will answer those at the end. So here is George Thalben Ball's Elegy.
John. Very nice. I'm glad John talked about the sequencer, because it's no good talking to me about a sequencer. I know nothing about it. I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the additional stops that we had added to the organ in its rebuild, and that's a thing called the pedal reed. Now, I suppose to non-organists, it sounds like I've selected two words at random, out of thin air, pedal and reed. And what it basically is, the pedals are the scary-looking keyboard underneath that the feet plays, and the sound of the pedals produces the depth and that bass that is required for the organ. Now, reeds are a type of stop which use reed vibrations to create their sound, a little bit like an orchestral woodwind instrument. The rule of thumb, there are two types of reed, soft and loud. The soft ones would include oboes, clarinets. The loud ones include horns and trumpets. And it's the inclusion of this latter reed when you add it to all the other main stops on the organ that creates that exhilarating full organ sound. However, most modest organs don't have a pedal reed, which makes the bass and the depth a little comparatively weak. In bake-off parlance, you could say that it's something like a musical version of the soggy bottom, a general lack of firm foundation for the ensemble above. The addition then of the pedal reed, in our case the trombone, increases the depth and the fullness of the sound of the organ, and it balances with the keyboard, so the whole instrument is now able to produce an exhilarating sound. Its effect in full organ will, we hope, be heard later during our short recital. But for my short demonstration, I'm going to, in fact, show the stop off as a solo stop, playing the tune. And the piece I'm going to play is a chorale prelude by Bach, one of many hundreds which he composed or improvised on Lutheran melodies. And he used to treat the melodies in various and many ways. In this case, he's put the tune in the bass. But the hands are not idle. In fact, they are bombarded with a constant and relentless counterpoint. More's the pity. It's one of Bach's settings of the Advent hymn, Nun kommt der Heden healend.
Right, third and last. To put it as an expression for real tennis, cut to the chase. I'll try and cut to the chase. And John's explanation is superb about the stops, because all we have to remind ourselves now with technology is that we're all going to pull out the stops. It used to take a long time to pull them all out, and now you can just press a button and they can all come out at the same time. Just a thought. Now it's my job today to explain to you something called mutation stops. What is a mutation stop? Well, if you go to the supermarket, you want to buy a carrot and straight, that'd be lovely, but if it's all sort of wiggly and weird, maybe it might be mutants in some form. Now, these mutation stops for pipes, it's got nothing to do with the shape at all. The mutation is to do with the fact that when you play a note, it sounds a different note, because the mutation stops are meant to enhance all the harmonies and of the organ. So that, let's say you're playing a C, and it might play another octave C up to a G, or 2 octaves up from a C and then a third above that. So all these extra little notes, these little pipes, add a huge amount of texture to an organ sound. And the clever thing about the mutation stops is that you can use them very subtly with very few stops and get the most gorgeous sound, which I'm going to try and demonstrate in a minute. Or you can also add them in quite large quantities to a full organ sound and get a huge, thrilling, extra volume of texture of sounds. And this organ didn't have those stops before. And so they really are absolutely wonderful. And they're a very, very wonderful addition indeed. So the stops that we're talking about that have been added to this organ of these small pipes are the one called a tierce, one called a nasard, and one called a mixture. And that is 3 lots of pipes sounding together just on one note. So if you're playing a chord of, say, 3 notes, that means there's an extra 9 pipes that are speaking. And if you're adding up the other ones as well, you can just imagine it's just huge. And it's wonderful, wonderful texture. And that's what gives this organ a thrilling sound. It also means that you can play very convincingly very romantic music, which you may not need some of these mutation stops, but with Baroque music, especially Bach and Buxtehude, and also some of the French repertoire, the early French repertoire, you certainly do, to convincingly play them, you need these mutation stops. So these are the names of the stops which I mentioned. Now, if you look afterwards at the organ, and you'll find these stops I'm talking about on the top right-hand side of the organ, it says tierce 1 3/5, and it'll say nasard 2 2/3. Now these are measurements to do with length in feet, and when you look at some of the other stops, they might say 8, which means 8 foot, or 16 foot, or 4 foot, 2 foot. This is to do with the bottom pipe of the whole of the range of the organ. So an organ, the bottom pedal pipe could be 16 feet long. And some of the little ones can be very, very small indeed. And on a cathedral instrument, you can get a 32-foot pipe. So the trouble with the physics of music is the fact all very well going from 8 to 4 to 2 to 1, but if you go the other way, 8 to 16 to 32, it's a massive amount of timber or metal to produce pipes like that. So enjoy the sound of the mutation stops from this little piece I'm going to play you now, a chorale prelude by Bach, one of the favourite ones of the Vicar, Liebes to Jesu, and you'll hear the thrilling sound of these mutation stops when you hear loud pieces played in the programme we're going to play for you afterwards. Thank you.